everyone. Welcome back to Risk Takers and Trailblazers, Women in Insurance podcast. This podcast is all about talking and learning from transformative women in the insurance industry, the truly amazing businesses and career moves that they are making, and providing support for others that are coming up. Today, we're very thrilled to have Joanna Marra. I met Joanna at a CAA Broker Marketing Academy event last year, feels like a few years ago. And I was captivated by, your insights on health and wellness, and particularly stress management. I thought, I don't know if I had been living under a rock, but I was like, oh my goodness, it was lots of light bulb aha moments. So I was so enlightened that I said, could we have Joanna come into Goose Digital? You really did us a favor at that time. And my whole team was also really blown away. They had pulled me aside afterwards and said, that was one of the best they referred to it as HR sessions, but that they had been to. But anyways, really happy to have you here. I know you're super passionate about health and wellness and all of it. And so, and everything that affects our professional and personal lives. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I can't believe that was a year ago, honestly. The next BMA is coming up on Monday. So that was exactly a year ago.
So we'll have a celebration. Too bad I wasn't bringing your mug there, but we'll figure out how to get you one. But yeah, so Joanna, why don't you share your story, how you came up and your kind of journey to this, because I know that's like a pretty extensive background.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it as succinct as possible. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a home where growth and learning was that was really the area that I lived in. And so my dad always motivated me to just go and learn and do things. And so that's why I think it took me a long road to get to where I am. But I started out in my undergraduate degree studying medical sciences and public health. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. I think I woke up every day and was like, I'm going to be a nurse. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But while I was in school, I was a student athletic therapist. So I worked with individuals that were playing sports. So I worked with, I did a lot of strength and conditioning, a lot of like rehab, injury prevention, things like that. And I just fell in love with the human body and human movement and all the things that went along with that. So I decided to go back to school. I did a first postgraduate degree in exercise science and lifestyle management. So from there, I became a clinical exercise physiologist. I worked at Toronto Rehab, so in the critical injury outpatient unit. So that's part of the University Health Network, and really worked with individuals to get them to a place where they could be mobile. While I loved it and it was very, it was rewarding, it felt repetitive. And I felt like I needed to be doing something more. And at the same time, I felt like there's more to rehabilitation. There's more to exercise than just physical movement. And while I was doing this, I was also personal training and teaching classes and things like that. And I was like, exercise is fun. People enjoy exercise. There's a reason people aren't doing it. Like, it's not because it's physically challenging. If you think about, when you were a kid and you would run, skip, and jump, like these are fun things. So why are people not exercising? And so I knew there was something missing, and I knew that was this right here. And so I decided to go back to school. I did a second postgraduate degree in wellness coaching. So really understanding behavior, understanding where people are at and where we want to take them. So really looking at behavior change models. And then from there, I did a third postgraduate degree in lifestyle medicine. At this time, I was already working in corporate wellness, I should say. Sorry, I started working in corporate wellness when I was doing my second postgraduate in wellness coaching. And I loved it because I got to work with such a wide variety of individuals. So then the third postgraduate was in lifestyle medicine. And then I followed that with a master's of science in integrative health and wellness. So that was my most recent degree. And it was really, it was kind of like the cherry on top. It was putting all of the things together that I had already studied. So it was really looking at, exercise for chronic diseases, nutrition for chronic diseases, sleep and stress management. It was putting the entire person together, which is exactly what I wanted, right? It's not this siloed approach of exercise is over here and then mental health is over here and stress is over here. It's when we look at people, we look at them as a whole person, and how can we get that person into a space of well-being. So now that was more of my formal education, and now working in the corporate space, it's really just about continuing to refine my skills, maybe more on the business side. So I just did a Queen's University leading a mentally healthy workplace program, Lean Six Sigma, those types of things that I'm always continuing to just refine my skills as a professional, as a leader.
Like, this is why I need to hire Joanna for myself. Like, I don't know how we can make that happen, but I just,
just right here, just put it right beside me, 24/7.
I was just thinking, if I went back to school, I want to go and learn all of that. That sounded fascinating. Like that's my next life.
That's it. And like I said, it was really, I think, because of my parents that it was like, it's never too late. Like, do it. So I was, my master's degree I did while I was working.
Wow.
It was just, I just loved it. Like, I was just so fascinated by it. And I knew that's what I wanted to learn. So I did.
So what challenges maybe, oh, sorry, go ahead, Helen.
I said that's amazing.
Yeah.
And to Di's point, if nothing else signifies and speaks to anyone that's listening that, don't stop at one, and find your passion, find what makes you happy. Right. Because that's truly what I heard. All of that was Joanna wanted to keep going. There was still a piece that she didn't quite have yet for herself. So continue to do the discovery, to do the learning, and then to bring it all back into one place is truly amazing.
Well, and I like that you were like you're trying to solve a problem. And I think that is, that's the coming from the right place. And that's fascinating, right? By saying like, why is there this barrier? And I'm determined to crack it. Right.
100%. Yeah. It was a big need for me. I remember specifically, I was training somebody and they came into the session and they were crying. And any other trainer that I had known would have been like, whatever, suck it up. Like, we got reps to do. And I was like, this person doesn't need to exercise right now. This person needs to cry. This person needs to, there's something else happening here. Like, what's going on in this person's life? And that was really like the biggest, like, we're missing something here. There's something missing.
That is fascinating. Yeah. Go ahead, Tan. I know you want to say something.
I'm curious, and I think people who are listening curious, because not a lot of companies in Canada that I know of have a wellness department. What does that look like? So what does the wellness department, like, what do you do as the director of wellness at CAA, and what impact does it have on employees?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, I'm going to try to be succinct here. So I think for a long time, organizations that implemented wellness, it was really they would sort of check a box, right? Like, okay, here's a discounted gym membership, or here's a, one thing. And, we offer this, wellness account. So like, we do wellness, and it was this check mark. I've been very fortunate to be at an organization that truly cares about its employees. And so when they brought wellness internally, so when I was hired, again, hiring somebody with education in health and wellness, not, okay, this is human resource initiative and we're just going to implement something that we think is good for its employees. This is an actual person who studied health and wellness. And so bringing that internally, we're now able to really shift the focus from reactive to preventative, which is really what we want to do on a global scale. But if we can start at an organization level, right, where people spend a lot of their time, then that's a great place to start. So it's really about, one, understanding your employee base. So you have to do a needs assessment. Like, what are we struggling with? Are we struggling with mental health? Are we seeing it in our disability claims? Are we seeing it in our benefits usages? Like, what does that look like? Are people struggling with cardiovascular disease or diabetes or whatever it is, right? So looking at that information first can determine where you need to start. And then it's about implementing it in a variety of ways. We're all different people. We're all on different journeys of our own health and well-being. And so it's about hitting different people at different times. So it might be an education session on diabetes. It might be learning and like connecting with our learning and development team to implement different types of education sessions. It might be more on the mental health side, so building resilience or looking at our mindset and how that affects the way that we behave and our outcomes, right? It might be on the totally other side. It might be more of a physical thing. It might be maybe implementing stretch breaks and meditation sessions and giving people those like micro tools that they can use day to day. I also have a registered dietitian on my team. It might be about providing people with different meal ideas or, you know, a high protein meal plan or a heart healthy meal plan or a vegan meal plan. It might be giving people exercises or doing fitness classes. Like there's so many different ways that we can move into this space of prevention. I think it just really depends on the organization that you are with.
Yeah, I love that we talked about it quickly in our when we were chatting, which was that it is almost an extension of HR. And
yeah, absolutely.
It's not truly HR. It is, but it's an accompaniment to HR.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What I think is fascinating is that we're these things are starting to break the silos between, you know, I guess personal and professional, right? We can't, we're at these organizations 8, 9, 10, 12 hours a day, whatever it is. And we can't expect to just be putting this mask on and
100%.
none of these things are none of your personal, your physical state, all these things have zero impact on your work or you know how you function for the 8, 9, 10, 12 hours a day. Like that's just it's when you actually say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous.
Yeah. Well,
I think sorry, go ahead, Helen.
No, I was just gonna say, thinking about our own employees and organizations that we all work in, and you made a comment, and I'm relating it to the person you had that came in and was crying, you know, and other people would be like, just suck it up and get to work, or, you know, do your reps. Well, the same thing sometimes happens in an organization.
Totally.
Right? They don't stop to pause and go, okay, what does that person need? Do they just need someone to listen to? Do they just need a touch on their shoulder? You know, is there something else that's going on? Because Jen's right, you know, we spend so much time at work, and then to layer on, you know, our conversations usually are very female centered. Layer on now a female, maybe a mother, a daughter, right? We all came from a mom, so we all have a mother that may still be with us or is aging, or a grandmother or somebody, right? Or someone else in your family that has now fallen on top of us, as well as our job. Forget being career oriented, to what you mentioned earlier, at some point going on a trajectory of a career path and wanting different things in your personal life, and also wanting high achievements in your career. You know, how does that all impact us? And definitely, I love the fact that your organization has carved out specifically, you know, that awareness, because I think that's just, you know, stellar.
Absolutely. Sure. I think, Jennifer, to your point, I think that it's shifted for a lot of people. Like, I hope people know this now. I think the pandemic was a good turning point for us. I think it was a silver lining that people realized that people come to work as whole people, right? We don't come to work as like this work version of ourselves, and then we go home and we're, you know, a different like we come to work with all of those stressors that are going on in the background at all times. And we can't, well, now we're in each other's homes, right? Like now it's just like very obvious and very apparent. Like we have things that are going on. And so if as a leader, you can be more empathetic towards your people, if you can, you know, lead with intention, and you can understand what's going on in somebody's lives and truly care about them, one, they're going to feel better. And two, they're going to give you more as an employee, right? If you are showing your people that you care about them, like if you truly, like, I care about your health and well-being, do XYZ, I'm giving you the tools and resources, whatever it may be. If you need today, take today, like, whatever's going on in your personal life, that person is going to work 10 times harder for you because they want to. They right? They want to show up to work. Like, I value my organization. They care about me. I care about them. It's just like this reciprocal relationship, right? And when we provide people these tools and resources, they're going to be more productive and more efficient. It's just, that's the way it is.
Yeah. I just want to stay on this for one sec. So it's interesting, and I'd love to find out if you have any research about this, but so I see, like, as you approach leadership levels, right? And depending on the age that you're at, right? Usually it's, you're a little bit older. You're not in your, early 20s trying to climb and all this kind of stuff, right? If we look at, and again, I don't want to stereotype here, okay? But if we look at, we all know the boomers before us. We all know the types of, you hit these levels, and life gets hard. Again, life can be harder. I don't want to stereotype in the younger ages. I'm just saying life gets harder as you get older, right? Lots of stuff's going on, right? And I wonder if we rewind, or even now, maybe we're in this now, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, if those people before us had that level of support, okay, had that level of compassion, support from their organizations, and this wasn't such a taboo thing, what would have their trajectory been, right? How many people before us have we seen, quite frankly, live unhealthy lifestyles, hit walls, become alcoholics? Like, I'm just throwing this out there, get these chronic diseases, and you sit down, you listen to their story, and they're like, oh yeah, I feel like I threw it all away. I spent 20 years as this big executive, and now they're just like a shell of their former self, right? And so I wonder what it would actually be like if you were in your whatever ages, you're hitting these hard times, there was this support, and we actually got people through stuff versus, I remember the days when I started in the corporate world, and if you took a leave of absence, and I don't know if it's still that way because I'm not in the corporate world anymore, but if you took a leave of absence, you were like, that's it, you're done, you're blacklisted.
It's career suicide.
It's career suicide.
On your record. It was, yeah.
Right. So again, I wonder, and Joanna, I don't know if you have done any research on that, but I probably could count, we all could, on two handfuls of people who hit walls, threw in the towel, right?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point, and that would be, looking retrospectively at these individuals, and you wouldn't really be able to do a study because they're done, right? They're not coming back, and how many people are coming back? It would be really hard to look at that research. But I can tell you now what we're seeing as we do tons of research, because obviously we want to measure the impact of our program. And what we can see is, while individuals may go off, what we're looking at is actually when are they coming back, right? The duration of the time that they're off, which is really important, because if you need help and you need to be off, that is okay. Like, we are very supportive of that. But are you coming back? When are you coming back? And are you coming back in full capacity, right? That's actually what's really meaningful to us. That's one piece. The other piece that's really meaningful to us is, are they staying with the organization, or are they leaving? That turnover piece is really, really important, because turnover costs companies a lot of money, a lot of money. So it's, if individuals are going off, or maybe they're not, but are they actually staying with the organization? And so a lot of the research that we're doing right now is comparing individuals that are involved or engaged in the wellness program and those that are not. And we are seeing that the turnover is substantially lower with individuals that are engaged. So it's powerful work, it's powerful research. My colleague Ramesh and I just presented last week actually at the People Analytics Conference, specifically looking at our wellness program and the impact on our bottom line. So you can go take a look at that if you want more research. But Jennifer, to answer your question, no, I haven't gone back. I don't know how they would actually look at that.
Yeah. But the point is interesting, right? Like,
yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too, like how simple things can make a big difference. Like something you were saying earlier just triggered in my mind that it's just saying to somebody, how are you really feeling? How are you really doing? And having that as a leader, like just showing that little bit of care, like smaller organizations that might feel like they don't have the resources to put a wellness program in place, just taking that people first approach.
Absolutely. You said something that I'm gonna push in two different directions. So people first, absolutely, like just care, like just the relationships that you would have outside of your workplace. Like you would ask your friends, you would ask your family members, how are you doing? Like why is that not happening in the workplace? And I mean, not everybody's the same, right? There's like you can do a social styles quiz, and maybe somebody that's not the type of connection that they need. But for the most part, I think if we can truly care about the people around us, we're going to be better off. That's one thing. The second thing you said was it could be a really small action that impacts in a large way or creates large change. If you've ever read the book Atomic Habits, it's a pretty like popular book. I'm sure a lot of the listeners have read it or have at least seen it. If you haven't, grab yourself a copy. It's really about how these like really small changes can impact you in such a profound way with consistency. So if you think about something as little as, taking 10 mindful deep breaths every day or going on a 5-minute walk, like this is something that I preach all the time when I'm working is I don't want people to listen to me speak and then the next day wake up and try to boil the ocean. Like, okay, tomorrow we're doing everything. Like scrap everything that I've done. I'm eating clean. I'm exercising. I'm going to do my mindful exercises. I'm going to read this book on resilience. You're going to fail. Like, unfortunately, I'm just going to say that right now. You're going to fail. And then you're going to be upset, right? And you're going to feel that failure and you're not going to continue again, right? So the way that you need to do it is let go of this all or nothing mentality that is like such a terrible way to view health and wellness because it is a lifelong journey, right? You're not going to succeed if you can't do this for the rest of your life. So finding things that you can implement that will allow you to be successful, that will then build your confidence and then you'll be more successful. And it'll just be this ladder that you'll climb. So maybe this week, all you do is focus on water intake. This week, I'm just going to increase my water intake. That's it. For however long it takes until it's a habit for me, that's what I'm going to focus on. That's it. I'm not going to focus on anything else. Then in 3 weeks from now, I'm noticing I'm drinking more water naturally. Like I'm not really thinking about it. Now I really want to focus on meditation. You know what? I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes every morning. Perfect. 3 weeks after that, I've got that down. You know what? I really want to start focusing on my movement. I'm going to go for a 5-minute walk every day. That's how you're going to build success for the long term.
I'm going to use that boil the ocean saying from now on. I love that.
100%.
Well, I was thinking of something where, rolling back and I'm the oldest in the group. So maybe this is just showing my age a bit more is that, there was a time when you went to work, you didn't go to work to make friends. You didn't go to work to be shown care. You were just at work to do your job and then leave. Right. So I think that's also part of the mind shift that we've seen come forward. And if I have to call it a movement, a wellness movement, and maybe some of that is because there are more female leaders in the world and in organizations, and hopefully that's what's helping to drive some of that. But, where we were 20, 30 years ago to where we are today is a very, very different place, right? Now you are at work and we want to really be there to support your coworkers, one another, right? We talk about it, we joke about it with the four of us, find your squad, find your tribe, find your people.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I want
That's
you to think about employees in your own space and think about the employees that maybe don't have a friend that come in and do their job and go home. And then I want you to think about the person that is like, maybe it's having a friend or a tribe or whatever it is, that you can just see the difference between the two, right? Like one is like, oh, come in, do my work, go home, give me my
head
paycheck
down.
alone, right? And the other one is like so excited. I want to learn more. Can I take on a new project? They're in this growth mode. They want to figure out what everybody else is doing. They're so excited to take on different projects. That's the person that's going to be successful in the long run.
But Joanne, not to take anything away from some of those people, that their personality, right?
Good call out. Good call out. There's also
could not be that, because I'm thinking, again, you said in your office, and as you said that, I was actually just kind of doing a quick,
that's fair
of the people, and you're right, because there are some people that I'm like, yeah, there are some individuals that are like that, but at the same time, that is them. But that doesn't mean, to be fair, that doesn't mean that they aren't the people that also still need to be checked in. I think that's the also 100%. Other side to that story, right?
So,
is the two sides.
Yeah, and let me just I'll take a step back there, because that was a great call out. It comes down to also knowing your people. Exactly. It comes down to knowing your people. So if this person has always been that way and that's how they like to function, they could get really excited while at their desks looking at an Excel document. That's what they like to do, right? There's all sorts that it takes to make a business run. Absolutely. But it's when you see a shift. Now I'm kind of going into the mental health space, but if you see a shift where somebody is like super energized and excited and they go into that space, maybe check in on them, and maybe vice versa. But absolutely, there's people that love their day-to-day and that's what they want to do. That's not what I'm referring to. So
no, and I didn't think so either.
Yeah. I just want to make that clear. Yeah,
because everyone, and that's that part in the managing of the people from your desk of being, director of wellness. It's that balance to know the difference between when someone really is crying for help, but I'm not being, using the pun word there, but truly, you can tell, and that was really part of our conversation, is how do you deal with the stress and the burnout and the resilience and helping people? Because just because that one employee isn't as loud and as outgoing as friendly as maybe their counterpart next to them or 2 seats down, doesn't mean that they also may not be internalizing something
100%.
that they need help with. And it's recognizing that as well.
Definitely.
I think one thing, go ahead, you go, Tan.
I was going to say, for time, we should shift to our outline so we make sure we're covering everything we need to cover. And so, Joanna, let's talk about stress, because there's a lot more research right now in the last 10 years of how detrimental stress levels are to people's health, and specifically to women because of our hormone fluctuations and how that can have severe impact on us. So how important is it for organizations to help employees learn how to manage stress? Because that's not something we grew up learning in school. They are now. I know with my daughter, she's 6, and they have classes on breathing and stress management and understanding. We didn't grow up with any of that. We barely started talking about mental health issues, like really the last 5 years. I remember I was one of the first to talk about anxiety in my organization 10 years ago. Everyone's like, oh, that's so embarrassing. I can't believe you're talking about it. So tell us a little bit about the work you do in terms of stress.
So first of all, I just want to say kudos for having the courage to talk about it, because it requires a person to just start the conversation, right? So I'm sure a lot of other people are very thankful that you did. So thank you for that. I want to talk about this in a couple different ways. So stress, I talk about this a lot in our organization. I've talked about this with Jennifer's group as well. I think stress gets a lot of really negative feelings towards it. Like you hear stress and you're like, ugh, bad, run away, stress, right? But there is good stress, and we do need stress in our lives. And there was actually a study done by Hans Seeley, and he took rats and he put them into 3 different environments. One with 0 stress. Everything was given to them. Food, whatever they wanted was in their cage. The second one was a lot of stress. So no food. That would be like crisis mode in that cage. And then a third cage where there was some stress, like there was food, but you had to run on the wheel in order to get the food, right? So there was a little bit of stress. The cage with a lot of stress, those rats died first. The cage with everything was given to them, the comfortable cage, those rats lived twice as long, but they died second. The cage with a little bit of stress, those rats lived twice as long as those in the comfort. They lived the longest. We need stress in our lives. If there was no stress, we wouldn't do anything, right? We wouldn't move forward. We wouldn't learn. We wouldn't grow. We wouldn't meet deadlines. We wouldn't do anything. We would just lay there. Everything's given to us, right? And so it's important, and I talk about this a lot, that we have a better relationship with that feeling of stress, because sometimes people feel all of the things that go along with stress, right? Maybe your palms are sweating, your heart's racing, and you're like, ooh, bad, walk away. But that's not necessarily the case, right? You do a presentation in front of a big group of people, you should feel a little bit of stress. That doesn't mean that it's bad, right? We have to step out of our comfort zone to learn and to grow. So I want to make that distinction that I think we all need to get better with the relationship of stress. The detrimental stress, the stress that we're talking about that causes harm, these are things that are like every day, constantly. Financial stress, for example. If you are in severe financial crisis, this stress stays with you 24/7, all the time, right? That stress is going to cause you harm. There are other things, of course, right? War, like there's so many things that can cause like severe stress. That's what we want to avoid. We're trying to avoid the stress that is all day, every day, never leaves. What we have to do to break up that short-term stress, which is good for us, and that long-term stress, that's where we need to find that relief, right? So things like meditation, mindfulness, exercise, doing a hobby, playing a game, whatever it is that causes you, laughing, optimism, all of these things are really important for us. So that's what you need to do to really break up that short-term and that long-term stress. So hopefully that was a good sort of overview of what's going on when it comes to stress. And then you mentioned hormones. I don't know if you can repeat that question. So we do, that's an added thing for us. Yeah. Absolutely. Women.
Because definitely. This is a women in insurance podcast.
Yeah.
We have, our cycles that we have to, navigate. Mm-hmm. And then we have either postpartum or perimenopause or menopause. And we know I had a trip to the doctor's office where I was like, something's really wrong with me. I keep getting strep throat over and over and over again. It's debilitating my life. And they couldn't diagnose me with anything. They couldn't say they could take my tonsils out. I had to see a naturopathic specialist in perimenopause. She's like, when you experience extreme amount of stress and your hormones are changing, it strongly affects your immune system. So what you could handle maybe in your 30s, you can't really handle so much in your 40s without coming up with strategies to help you manage stress. And I had no idea. I had no idea.
Absolutely. So I actually have a similar story. I randomly, maybe I want to say about a year ago, I was doing a presentation and I had a full-blown panic attack, and I present all the time. So this might be new for our listeners who hear me present all the time. And I couldn't breathe. My arms were numb. I was like, what's going on here? Like, this is so bizarre. And I just said, sorry, I need a minute. I stood up, I grabbed some water, I like shook out my arms, took a couple deep breaths, right? Tapping techniques, if you've ever heard of that, just some other techniques. And I sat back down and I continued with the presentation. And I went to the doctor and I was like, what was that? Like, that was wild. And she was like, that's anxiety. Like, it was called something specific, performance anxiety. And I'm like, I've never had that before. She said, specifically, this is what she said to me. She said, stress. And I said, no way. I worked and did my master's at the same time. No way. I'm feeling good right now. She said, just because you were going at 120 kilometers an hour for your entire life doesn't mean that now you can still do that. Mm-hmm. Right? Like that's not how it works. Like, just because you used to be able to handle 50 balls juggling, now maybe your max is 40. And so you were at 48 and your body said, it was a learning experience for me, and it totally shifted. I think it made me a little bit more empathetic to other people, because I was like, whoa, this is what people feel when they are uncomfortable, and this is a lot. This is a lot to handle. And so it allowed me to be more empathetic towards other people. But yeah, I don't know if that's things could shift every 3-4 years with your hormones. Things could shift constantly, like you mentioned. Postpartum depression, perimenopause, menopause, and we're dealing with all of that as well as all of the other stuff that we have going on in our lives. It's a lot. And so we need to have those things that work for us, whether it be exercise or meditation or a tapping technique, or listening to something comedic at the end of every day to help us, just like whatever it is, but we have to find something.
I just love what you said about the whole, just because you could do this before. And I don't think this is, obviously there's major hormones at play here with women, but I don't think what you were just saying there is just around male or female. But I thought that was really interesting about, well, what do you mean I can't go it? Like, you're like having this self, argument with yourself. And I mean, I feel that all the time. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, you've been like in way different situations, right? And I even feel that with like my male friends too, where they're, maybe been an athlete their whole life and approaching 50, and they're like, I'm just, I don't got it in me, and I think that's a hard transition, right?
Definitely.
It's a hard transition.
The other thing I was thinking of is, how do we make that normalized and part of a conversation, and not be shamed, be it our own shame to ourselves, or feeling like, again, maybe a bit of imposter, which we haven't touched on here, but we've touched on another podcast of, going into maybe you're applying for a new job and realizing that you may have to go a little bit harder, but you also need to be realizations of, hey, you know what, I can't do all that stuff, but I'm still good at my job and I can still do it, right? So I think that's, part 2 to any of our podcasts. We should have prefaced that to Joanna, is that there's always a part 2. But the part 2 piece really is, how do we make that okay? How do we get others, and I'm not saying all leaders, but your executive leaders and higher in some larger organizations, how do we make that okay? And they don't expect that person that in their 20s, was a AAA superstar, and now they're still a AAA superstar, but not as fast.
So I will share with you, first of all, Tanya, I thank you again for your courage, because sharing that story allowed me to share my story. And this is exactly the space and the platform where people can hear these things, right? And so for me, I took it, I'm a big believer of everything happens for a reason. And so for me, I was like, why did this happen? And I was like, you know what, as a person who is not shy and very extroverted, I was like, I need to share this story with others. And so I didn't just sit down at my desk and say, okay, let me just pretend that didn't happen. No, I told everybody at my workplace. And I said, oh my goodness, this happened. And, I'm working through it. And I think that made me more relatable to other people, because they're like, okay, well, if this happens to Joanna, who speaks all the time in front of large groups, this could happen to anybody, and that normalizes it. The one piece I'll say there is a strong correlation between wellness and belonging. And we need to make sure that we are in environments of belonging. And how does that happen? Through trust, through leadership, right? So if you feel like you belong in an organization or a friend group or a family group or whatever it is, you're automatically more resilient. 100%. So if I didn't feel comfortable in my environment, I wouldn't have shared that with my leaders. I wouldn't have shared that with my peers or my colleagues, right? But because I'm in an environment where I feel like I belong, I'm more resilient, and I can share those things openly with knowing that there's not going to be any reprimand. It's going to be an environment of care, and it's going to be, how can we support you through that?
Yeah,
right?
And that's important. The conversations, it's avoiding the shame conversation, making it normalized, making your spot on, Joanna, which is having platforms like ours, or having those start conversations. If people are hearing us and they go somewhere else and have the conversation, you know, it's that trickle effect. I'll tell a friend, you tell a friend, you tell 3 friends, and so on and so forth, and really building that momentum.
I want to touch on one thing there about the belonging, and something that you said, Helen, about these transitions and supporting people. I think that something I've been thinking a lot about lately is supporting and help and growing people where they're at. Okay, so let's say you have somebody who, you know, like you said, they're a triple star. This is what they've been doing for so long, you know, but where are they at now? And how do we support their skill set, putting them in the right position for where they are now? So you can't, just because, like you said, somebody goes into, you know, oh, I can't go at a 150, but I know I can go at a 40 in these areas because I've got 25 years experience. How can we support putting people in the right roles of where they're at versus criticizing, right? For that doesn't even, if you put growth, and you'll probably say this a heck of a lot better than I'm going to say this, but you can't put growth, I guess. I mean, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but you know what I'm saying, Joanna, right? Like,
I can give you an example in the training.
Please.
I can give you an example in the training space when I used to personal train, and people would say to me, "Oh, well, I used to be a collegiate athlete, or I used to be." Okay, well, you're not now. So we're not going to deadlift 400 pounds just because you used to be able to. Like, that's not where you're at right now. Right now, we're actually just going to rehab your shoulder. So we're going to do these really small moves. Like, this is where you are at today. It doesn't matter what you used to be able to do. And again, I learned that when I had that panic attack. And I think everybody has to learn that. Like, what are the skills that you have today?
And what can you
where do you want to go?
Yes. And what can you bring? Like, you know, my husband's a 2nd-degree black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So it was a hard road coming up. And he had to go through a lot to be okay with now transitioning to teaching, right? And what can he bring so athletes go through this, right? And I think it's the same thing in the workplace. If we have a longtime executive, anyways, we're all saying the same thing, but there's some gold in there. I think what we miss is when we all talk about growing businesses and impacting bottom line and all this kind of stuff, there's some gold that I think a lot of us are missing because we're not paying attention. We don't know the people around us as well as we think we do. And there's not that sense of belonging, right? Or I mean, I'm not trying to blanket everything. I'm just saying that we can do better on that realm, because we're missing the gold, in my opinion, right?
Knowing people, super important, being there for people. And I think when we think about health and wellness, I'll just say this, if businesses aren't doing it, right, we don't have time for this. It's just like, we need to do our jobs and get out of here, right? Like, we barely have time for our day-to-day. We're not going to have time for this. And the way that it seems counterintuitive, but if you actually take breaks, if you actually like step away and come back, you're actually more efficient. You're a better problem solver. You can do things faster. So you can do more in less time if you are well. Okay. And so I'm sure we've all felt this before. I like to use this example. You know, when you're like just in a groove, like you're sleeping well, you're eating well, your exercise, everything just feels like, boom, I can do anything. Like, you feel like Superwoman. You're like, give it to me. I got this. And then there's sometimes where you feel the complete opposite of that. And you're like, nothing is working. Like, I can't sleep. I'm constantly bloated. Like, I just don't feel good. I'm not exercising. Like, I'm agitated all the time. Like, right? If you can give people the tools and resources to be in that groove, in that flow more often, how do you think they're going to perform in the workplace?
Right. Exactly.
The productivity is going to skyrocket. Their efficiencies are going to skyrocket. They're going to feel good. They're going to bring the best version of themselves into the workplace. So you giving them the tools and resources to be the best version of themselves 24/7 will impact your business. And so to me, it's just like a no-brainer. It's just like, why is not every single company doing this? It's going to make everything better, like everything. And it's going to impact your bottom line in a positive way.
Yeah.
It's funny because I've had talks lately with some of my teams, and you go through ebbs and flows of busy times, crunch times. And I said, if we get through a crunch time and you're all broken and burnt out, then that's not worth the work you put in. That's not us succeeding. So we need to get through it, and we need to work hard, but we all need to be healthy and reaping the rewards at the end.
Yeah. 100%.
Joanna,
Taking your time, taking your vacations.
Can you just tell our listeners, how can we recognize signs of burnout within individuals of our team? Because we do but there's not a lot of education. We see articles online, but how can we see if something's not right or we think it's leading to burnout, and what can we do?
So that's a great question. And I think it does come down to knowing your people, because not everybody's going to react in the same way. So if you have somebody who's that outgoing, energetic person and they're all of a sudden changing their behaviors, they're a little bit more quiet, they're more reserved, right? That could be it. It could be somebody who is already quiet and reserved, so it might be a little bit harder to tell. That's going to come down to actually having a conversation with them, right? Like what I'm talking about is recognizing it in somebody else first, then I'll talk about recognizing it in yourself. So having a conversation, how are you doing? How are things going? If people are a little bit more snappy, right? Like just like short, like their tempers are shorter. Their fuses are shorter, right? They're just behaving in a way that you're like, this isn't normal for this person. So maybe let me dig a little deeper and say, how are things going? Is everything okay? Right? Asking those questions is really important. And that's more so from a leadership perspective, or even a colleague, peer-to-peer perspective. Recognizing it in yourself takes a lot of self-reflection. So I think it's important for us to pause and reflect and understand. You know yourself best. It's hard to say like, oh, if I'm doing this, automatically that means I'm burnt out. Because again, everybody has different, I like to say everybody has different sizes of plates. So your plate might be overflowing and it might be this big. My plate might be this big and it might be overflowing, but everybody's plate is different. So unfortunately, there's no right answer there, but just recognizing in yourself, like, this is not my normal behavior. Am I snapping on everybody around me? Like my kid just asked to go for a walk and I'm like, oh, they didn't actually do anything wrong. Like that's on me. Like maybe I need to pause and I need to reflect and I need to figure out what's going on here. Right? Maybe it's just feeling low. Like you're just like lack of energy. Like all I want to do is sit on the couch. Like I don't want to do anything. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm a huge TV fan. But if you're recognizing that that's like all you have the energy for, that there's no motivation to do anything else, right? So anything that's really out of your normal is maybe a time where you need to rejuvenate. And rejuvenation could be different for everybody, right? It could be a hot bath with some candles. It could be, for me, it's lifting heavy weights or like playing a sport, right? Letting that energy out. It could be mindfulness, meditation, yoga. It doesn't really, there's no one right thing. It could be reading a book. Like it's just understanding and recognizing that your tank is running low, and how do you give yourself that energy?
And it could be boundaries. It could be
boundaries. Setting boundaries is really important. Absolutely.
Yeah, I sent this group a message the other day because this really resonated with me. And it was talking about, I will just read it. I blamed my job for my burnout until I realized I was the common denominator. No one forced me to skip the gym. No one or not sleep or emotionally eat. No one demanded I pushed myself to the limit at work and other places, and then irrationally break down at home.
It seems self-inflicted when you read it, right? And you're like, wow, that's me.
Right. And something as simple as, so anyways, that's a whole other,
No, but I love that. I love that. And I'm sure you've all heard before when people say like, don't say I don't have time. Like, don't say I don't have time to go to the gym. Say out loud, this is not a priority for me. Because the truth of the matter is, if it was a priority, you would do it.
Right.
You would.
Yeah. 100%. And it's okay to be, and it's okay to be on that. Yeah. So like you said, if there's been this change, and you're like, wow, I can't even keep my eyes open past 8 o'clock, and I haven't really been prioritizing my gym or my walking or whatever. Like, that's that change that you're saying, recognizing yourself to say what's going on here.
What do I need? Exactly. What do I need to refill my bucket? Maybe it's a vacation. Maybe it could be something small. Again, it doesn't have to be big, but just recognizing in yourself what you need.
Yeah. And it could be, and it could be the bigger macro things where it could be, I need a career move, or it could be that I need to put some boundaries in here. And if that means that this leader's not going to like that.
Now you're getting deep. Now you're getting into now you're getting into like purpose-driven work, which is another thing that absolutely fuels us. I think,
that's a phase two.
That's a part two here. But if you truly enjoy what you're doing, of course, every job is going to have things that you don't love. Like, this is not like, we're not in a rom-com here. Like, everything is amazing. Of course, there's going to be things like, I don't want younger people watching the show being like, oh no, I don't like this, I shouldn't be. No, of course there's going to be things that are going to be challenging and be hard. But in general, do you feel like you're creating an impact? Do you feel like this is aligning with your values and your purpose?
There's the key word right there.
Values, so important. Understanding your values. Do your values align with your organization? Like, so incredibly important. And if you have that alignment, you will be able to go to work with that extra little bit of energy as well. There's so many pieces to wellness, guys. This is what I'm trying to get at. It's not just exercise and nutrition. There's so many things. Yeah.
And the last piece before we wrap is, I was thinking the value piece, which, Tinsley talks about in our last podcast in her book, about if your values, if your company's values don't align with your values, that's impactful. But I also think the other side to it, when I read that and I hear that, I instantaneously go to, it's great if there's values listed, but do they actually practice those values? Again, now I think we're on podcast 4 or 5 version from this conversation.
We're on a series. We're on
a roll. But that's part of it, right? It's being valued, and the values have to align. And I've learned that. I don't think you learn that early on in your career. I think that's, again, maybe something we can help bring to those up and coming through the industries and through anywhere. I do it to my children as they're going into their careers as a teacher, and my other one's finishing university, to say, go somewhere where your values
100%
meet where you're going to work. And no one would have ever told me that. Roll back 30 years that I've been working, that was never a thing. So again, it's that evolution which I think helps us to make us more resilient, understand the wellness sector is really what's going to help us, the workforce, and not only us, but the up and coming individuals coming into industries. They're going to work longer, hopefully, because they're going to live longer, so they need the better wellness.
Absolutely.
Maybe we can shift a little bit. I don't know if we want to kind of go here yet, and I know, Joanna, that like your organization, which I will say on record, is like one of the best cultures I've ever seen and had a privilege to work with. I tell everybody that. So it might be a little bit hard for you to kind of get into this zone of what my next question, but I do think, but you do go to all the events, okay, and you do see the industry as a whole, and like, what is your opinion? There's a lot of old school behavior, if you will, in the industry still to this day. I would say that particularly at these events, outside of your organization's specific events, there's a culture of a lot of drinking, a lot of, that's still very prevalent. Like, do you have any opinions on that? I don't know if we're any different than some of these other industries that prioritize that kind of culture, but it's still very prevalent, and it's obviously not good for you, right?
I would say that I'm noticing a shift. I've only been, I know you have all been in the insurance industry for a long time. This is something that's very new to me. I've been in January, I think it'll be 5 years. And coming to these events is probably like maybe 3. So it's still new. But I can tell you that people like the information. So like when I first started speaking at these events, it was, what is this? Like, what's going on? What's happening here? Or like, what are these conversations? And now all of a sudden they're seeking me out. Like oh, I want to come listen to this. This is amazing information. This is what we need. I want to bring this into our organization. So it's really changing, I think, from that perspective. I don't think I want to comment on people's personal habits or behaviors. That's, to each their own, but I think everything in balance and moderation is really, again, every person is different.
Yeah. And you got something you're saying there?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of us or a lot of brokerages and other channels can't necessarily afford a wellness department. But what I do want to say is I've been through burnout twice now since 2020. It's not fun, but what really helped me was seeing a nutritionist, was going to a naturopath, was getting my massage and acupuncture. And a lot of us have those benefits. And it's amazing.
Absolutely.
A change in your diet, a change in your mindset. You might be low, like I was low on magnesium and like vitamin D specifically, and just supplementing and changing my diet has significantly changed my quality of life. And so anyone listening, I urge you, if you're feeling burnout or for me, burnout looked like I just wasn't motivated to do the work I used to love. It was starting to become a chore, and I was getting short with people, which is not my personality at all. And when I recognized it, it was an article that came up in 2020. It was August 2020. I was like, oh, shoot, that's me. And I got help, but I didn't get help from a therapist. I went to a naturopath and a nutritionist, and I started exercising and trying to like escape my brain a little bit. I think a lot of us do have coverage for that. And I urge you all to seek that out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Talk to the professionals. Absolutely. I think we talked about a lot of really important things, and I want to thank you all for having me and having these important conversations. I think it's so incredibly important for people to hear, and it's a platform outside of the workplace that individuals can go to get a little bit more information, and that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's a big passion play for us. I think that I'm just totally blown away by how many amazing women we've met and men we've met actually as well that have commented and come on and on all these kinds of things. Like it's a hard time, I think, to be in business, but I also think it's an exciting time. It's going to be really cool to see how things shift over the next 10 years versus these old school ways where, you're basically just showed up at work, hopefully get a paycheck. It was all about, again, I'm not saying that people didn't build their careers back then. Obviously they did, but definitely, I think it wasn't necessarily in a healthy way. So.
Absolutely.
Joanna,
we're here for the change.
Yeah, exactly. Where do you think, so you did share you did share that book. Is there any other resources that you could share for the listeners?
I think some of the main ones, so Atomic Habits is great. Oh my goodness. I at my old place, I had my books right behind me so I can turn and point to them all, but they're in a different room today. I love any content on growth mindsets. I think it's so important that we are open-minded in the way that we approach life. And I do tons of presentations in that space as well. Anything on resilience, growth mindsets, habit forming I think is really important. There's tons in that space. I'm sure anybody can just Google it and find a bunch, but I think anything that resonates more so with you as an individual. As I mentioned, there's so many different components to well-being, and everybody might be focusing on something different: emotional well-being, social connections, physical health, whatever it is. And so finding something that works for you and doing that will allow you to be successful.
I love how you mentioned that our podcast too is like a nice platform for people to come to and learn these things. I know I speak for the four of us when we say this is our wellness plan, just gathering
and chatting.
Yeah, it's great.
I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, Joanna, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and sharing all of your expertise with us. It's very impressive, your journey and your background. Anyone listening, we will click some resources or link some resources below. And please, can we ask people to follow you on LinkedIn or?
Yeah, of course.
So follow Joanna on LinkedIn. We'll link everything below. And we really hope you enjoyed today's episode. I know we did. And yeah, thank you again for joining us, Joanna. And perhaps there'll be a part 2 someday down the road.
We're working on a panel, right? We have a vision of we will have a panel session one day.
Or we could do a retreat.
Yes, let's do that.
The retreat would be great, wouldn't it? All right.
Thank you all again so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And we'll chat soon.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna.